the city. Politics, progress, game boards, objects viewed like pawns till we change up our mindset. Value of the dollars at the center of this conflict, where lives only matter if they serve to make a profit. But if a midget sees further on the shoulders of the giant, then he should see further than the tyrant, and build a future within the lions. With success is our science and the quest to go higher. It's the heart of the city. Wake up, world. You are watching HeartCity TV. I'm your host, Malik Boyd. I hope that wherever you are in good spirits and all is truly well. I am excited for this show. This is the final installment in the Vision 2020 series, something that we have focused on for the last 3 weeks to ensure that you had all the facts you needed to know about the November 2020 election. You heard from the Democrats. Everything from Michael Blake, the vice chair of the DNC. You heard from Ambassador Carol Mosley Braun. You heard from Congressman G.K. Butterfield, Ashley Allison, senior strategist, and Ashley Antier, the senior strategist for the Joe Biden campaign. Today, you will hear from Paris Dennard, who happens to be the RNC senior communications director for the Black Outreach, African American Outreach. You also hear from Vernon Jones, a Democratic state representative in Georgia who is supporting Donald Trump. And you also hear from Mark Little, who represents Black Voices for Trump. If you know anything about what has occurred in the Northeastern region, specifically in Philadelphia over the last couple of hours, we are dealing with a police-involved shooting that has produced riots across the city. Clearly, the issues of community engagement and relations between law enforcement and African Americans, Black America, is still leaving much to be desired. This recent shooting has opened up what many will say have not even served as healed wounds for the city of Philadelphia. And so we're back at another conversation about how we handle mental health, number one, how we handle resources. What does defunding the police really mean? Can we afford to have a defunding of the police? And then for those who have articulated reallocation of resources, what does that mean? All of those conversations are boiling up to a weekend of GOTV efforts as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris seek the White House, and Donald Trump and Mike Pence seek to retain the White House. Will those conversations play a role in the voter turnout? We shall see. More importantly, I am encouraging everyone to never give up your right to exercise your voice and your vote. And so for everyone who's listening, please, by all means, get out and vote Tuesday, November 3rd. We cannot complain if we're not actively engaged in making that change. And I'm always excited about those who come to our show to make change. To that end, this brother, I am always pleased to have him in the house. Pastor Trey Ford. He is the youth and family pastor over at Bethel, right here in Philadelphia. My brother, welcome back home to Heart City, man. It's great having you.
Man, it is good to be here. Like, this is the first time I've done it like this.
Yeah,
so it's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Yes,
yeah. It's a blessing. I'm excited to be here. I'm glad that you would have me for such a time as this.
Such a time as this. Yes.
It's weird because one of the things that when the news of what's happening in Philadelphia, here's what I believe, is that the world watches Philadelphia. I'm not originally from here. I'm originally from Birmingham, Alabama. Mm-hmm. And what I believe is that when things happen in Philly, everyone has to notice. Yeah. The problem is we often notice the bad a lot more. But I do believe that even in this uncertain and messy time, that we could be a source of light. We could be the source of hope. Yeah. Not because we got it all together, but, we have a greater source of hope. And that's what I believe wholeheartedly.
Indeed. And we have the chance to define what brotherly love and sisterly affection really looks like. Yeah. Not just in community, but in kingdom as well. And so Look, you know the issues. You're right here in the thick of the aftermath of a very tragic shooting, but nonetheless, there were still issues before.
Yeah.
So whether it be education, lack of funding, small businesses struggling to survive on the heels of COVID, families dealing with the challenges of being cramped and experiencing what the realities are within their dynamics. All of these things are playing out in your heart, as God has called it, is to the community and the city. And so I'm going to ask you, with all that you know, with all that you have experienced, to lead us into our 2-minute prayer for the city.
Well, I want to read something from Romans 15, verse 13, because I got to go to the word of God. And it reads it this way. It says, I pray that God, the source of hope, will fill you completely with joy and peace because you trust in him. Then you will overflow with confident hope through the power of the Holy Spirit. See, I know we always talk about hope, and unfortunately, I think sometimes our idea of hope is a little bit off. We assume that hope is somewhere where we end up, but I believe hope is not only the road that we take, but it's the fuel to get us there. One of the issues that we usually have, if I'm being honest, is sometimes we confuse better with achievement. Oh, it's better. And if we're not careful, we'll get into a place of better, and we'll fall back into those same old habits, those same old things that got us in the bad place in the first place. The bad place, first place. We're still there. And so here's the thing. I want to challenge everybody. This is what I love about my brother. This is what I love about this community. This is what I love about this show, is we don't just have passion, we have information. And so we can take that information and put it with our passion, and we can make decisions that cause us not to get complacent on November the 3rd after the vote happens on November 3rd. But November 4th is where we still got to work. We still have things to do. We still have to push. See, whether you're on one side or the other side, some people are going to be happy on November 4th and some people are not. Whether you're happy or not, we still got to work together. And so we still have to be focused on, guess what? We can still come together. And if our hope stays fueled up, if our hope is being refueled, if our hope is the road that we're taking to this destination of peace and prosperity that we all want, then we can get there together. You may feel like a winner or a loser, but guess what? We're all in this together. So whether you know it or not, your hope can't be in the outcome. Your hope has to be the fuel to keep you to work, keep working despite the outcome. So God, I come to you right now. God, I say, God, let me just speak to the city of Philadelphia, that even in this tragic moment, God, that you can be seen, God, that you can be known. God, nothing that has happened has caught you off guard. You were aware before it happened. But God, keep us steadfast and unmoved in your presence and your power, not to just feel hopeless, but to dwell on the hope that's on the inside that comes from you. God, help us to be the light, a light shining on a hill, not for our glory, but for your glory. And God, we still rest that you can be seen. You can still do exceedingly abundantly far above all we ask or think. God, we need you. God, you're our only answer. And God, in you will find peace. It's in Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Boy, no, you didn't just add a whole little sermon in there, boy. You put the whole series in there, Doc.
Listen. I'm not trying to preach.
No, we needed that.
It's in me right now. And this is what I need. If you're a pastor, you love Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, let's not allow our political platforms to shut down our heavenly responsibility. That when this is over, we still got to represent the kingdom. I'm an ambassador here in the United States, but I got to still represent the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
And so that means loving some folks I may disagree with. Yeah. That means reaching across and saying, how can I work with you? That's what I would challenge everybody. I know we want to say left, right, whatever. Forget left, right. Let's all look up.
Right.
Who God has called us to be. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do all of that.
Listen. We need that. And sometimes we need from a different voice. Yeah. Quite frankly, many times the ear becomes fatigued hearing it from the same source many times. And so it's good to hear you, my brother, to admonish us in that way. And so talk to the broadcast audience. What's happening on your side of the kingdom? Clearly you're in Philly. Yeah. There's a lot going on the news, but the footprint of the kingdom is still on fire because of what he's purposed in you.
You know what? Here's the thing. People may not be aware of this. And because our church doors, I'm in our auditorium right now. Usually this place holds 700 plus people. We have 7 services a weekend, all of that. And so you can be in an empty space and feel like nothing is happening. But what I'm learning is more is happening than we know. In fact, I'll be honest, I've preached in more churches during COVID than ever. I'm usually traveling a lot, but I've been a whole lot more places. And here's the thing. If people are willing to allow God to move, he will. The problem is our intellect gets in the way of us experiencing that. And so what I have been seeing, especially in this season, you know, I watched this wave happen. So we go back to when COVID first happened, and then everything that happened with Michael Floyd and everybody at the beginning, there was this enthusiasm. And now there's this fatigue to say, oh, all right, another one. And we're back to normal.
We're back to the same.
What I'm saying is this: we cannot, kingdom people, you cannot afford to take your foot off the gas. See, the faith without works is dead. So we still got work to do. So what I think the church has, we have an opportunity now to not just be a part of the conversation, but be an example of how to have the conversation. Sadly enough, some of the church people, some of the folks who go to church every week have been the biggest problem. We've almost become a reproach because there's no difference. We're more so following a platform than following the King of Kings. And so I think right now is an opportunity for us to reset. You know, Jesus spent most of his time telling church folks how wrong they were.
Come on, Doc.
He was ticking them off. Right? So this idea that some of us have found comfort in our political ideologies in the church is a problem. God did not call us here or call us to be people of comfort. He called us to be catalysts for change. So therefore, if we're going to change church, if we want to change the world, he has to be able to use us and cause us to say there's a higher standard. We can't be as divisive. We got to stop that. Like the church right now, like I find myself sometimes looking at folks like, oh yeah, Trey, you can't do that. Like, it's easy to preach not to do that, but it's hard to live that. And so right now, I believe our footprint has been lost because we blended in with everybody else. So right now we got to be different. And that's what I'm hoping happens. But the problem is that's not something that's going to happen on November the 4th. You got to do that all the way through 2021, or we'll find ourselves back here every 4 years acting just like the world and not making any difference.
That's a 365 piece right there. 365 piece. So let's talk about this. Many are asking about the shirt that you have. It's okay to have Jesus and a therapist too. Come on. So let's dig into that, because mental health has come up in this recent shooting, but even before that, so we would, if we're going to be honest,
I'm a little bit different
as a therapist.
Listen, my wife is a therapist. Right?
There we go.
So that's what she does. And if I'm being honest, because I know there's some people from Alabama who are watching it, but I'm gonna call out the South real quick. When I was growing up, you either had Jesus or you was just lost, right? The idea of mental health or the need for mental health was almost shunned. So you would have people struggling and not being able to manage their feelings, talking about, oh, that's a demon. You just need to cast that out. And what we have to understand is I believe that God works in and through people. And I believe that therapy is something to tackle those situations that we can't deal with on our own. See, you can't just pray everything away. Like, Lord, help me, Lord, help me, Lord, help me. No. What I do believe is, especially in our community, it's almost been a topic of shame to admit that you need help. And you cannot fix what you won't first address. So I am keenly convinced, to people of color, to Christians, wherever you find yourself, that it is imperative, number one, that you be honest and say, I need help. And I believe that God can work in and through that. I believe that mental health is something that has plagued us for years. There are people who have done things and we've called them crazy or they just bad, whatever. No. There are things that they haven't dealt with. And if we do not begin to tap into those resources to get the help that we need, we will destroy ourselves. And just to be truthful, a lot of preachers, a lot are fronting, trying to act like they have it all together because they will not be strong enough to admit that they have a weakness. So I'm no, mental health is something that I firmly believe in. Besides having my wife, I mean, she's awesome. She's a game changer. I love my wife. Hey, babe. But the reality is that we have to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, listen, we won't fault anyone from going to the doctor. I mean, we all getting tested and going to the doctor every time my nose sneezes now. And so the same respect that we can give a physical condition, we have to give our mental condition the same respect too.
Boy, you you just talked up a whole year-long sermon series. And that's very important because of the PTSD that African Americans and Black America has faced. Yes, the Bible is obviously basic instructions before leaving Earth. However, there are some tools that he did provide for us to deal with what is happening as we're on Earth.
Yes.
Right. So, and those are absolutely crucial, especially in these times. And so tell the broadcast audience how they can worship and fellowship with you and the family over at Bethel.
So right now we are still online. We are still meeting online. So you can go to bchurch.tv and you can watch our services with us online on Sundays. We do run another one on Mondays as well. We are in a small reopening plan. Where we begin to allow a few people into the room. So when you have thousands usually on the weekend, it's hard with the social distancing and things, but we are taking steps to keep people safe. But I would say, hey, check us out, bchurch.tv. We're a diverse church, but we serve one God. And what I found has been in this season, above all, we're very, very diverse. And so the beauty of it is that what I know is that God can take someone who thinks completely different, looks completely different, votes completely different. We can come together and make a difference in the world still.
Bruh, I love you, man. I appreciate you. And I honor what God is doing in your life and the life of the ministry. Thank you again, man, for covering us in prayer.
Glad to be here, bro.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So you have heard from Pastor Trey Ford. Please, by all means, follow him and the family over at Bethel. We'll make sure that we post their information on our social media pages. I'm going to a break. On the other side, Paris Dennard. You will hear from him. Clearly, you've heard him in other media outlets. We're taking out all of the antagonism, all of the nonsense. I need everybody to get all of the information so that they can make the choice that best suits them. That means you. And so, as promised, our final installment of Vision 2020, you'll hear from Paris Dennard on the other side of the break. Take out your stethoscope. You're listening to and watching HeartCity TV. We'll be right back.
Eloidan. What a beautiful name. It means magic. You don't know us. You won't understand what we're about to say, but one day, Idan, you will. Because we want to make you a promise. We want to be held to it. And every year for years to come, we'll remain committed to it. A promise between you and us and the planet. We promise that everything we make, the way we make it, and even how you use it, will be carbon neutral by your 10th birthday. That might not sound like much to you, Idan, but believe us, it's not a promise that's easy to keep. But it's one we intend to. Promise.
The Philadelphia Opportunities Industrialization Center is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to provide education, training, and employment services to assist the unemployed, underemployed, homeless, and disadvantaged youth and adults. Visit PhilaOIC.org to learn how OIC can help you achieve self-sufficiency and empowerment, education, training, job placement, through technology, access, and economic development for a better tomorrow. Call Philadelphia OIC.
We are back. You're watching HeartCity TV. I am excited to have this brother with us. He is a longtime GOP political commentator, writer, consultant, BT, BBC, CBN, CNN, Fox, MSNBC. The list goes on. The Washington Post, LA Times. He is the RNC Senior Communications Advisor for Black Media Affairs, none other than Paris Dennard. Paris, welcome to the show, man. Good to have you, brother.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Look, let's get right into this. Paris, you get beat up in the media for the positions that you take, the information that you give. Here at Heart City, we don't do that. It's our premise and purpose to make sure that the information gets out, that individuals can take the facts and craft a true position for themselves. Many want to know in this space here, why President Trump? Why support him November 2020? What would you say to that question?
Yeah, I would say that President Trump has kept his promises to the Black community. That is primarily where I focus a lot of my energy and my time and my efforts, which is engaging with Black media, Black journalists, and Black American outlets so that we can have a better understanding of the policies that the president has implemented, because a lot of times the mainstream media platforms do not accurately depict the things that he does. And so for me, I look at the facts, I look at the record, and the record of President Trump is one that I believe aligns itself with the things that I believe the Black community cares about. Number one, education. This President Trump, has been a true champion for issues like school choice and charter schools. President Trump has been, in my opinion, the number one advocate for HBCUs on a national scale in Washington, D.C., in the office of the president, and the biggest one in history. You cannot underestimate the power of the platform the president has offered to HBCUs by means of touting them everywhere that he goes. He was the first president to tout HBCUs and their importance on foreign soil when he did so in Davos, Switzerland. He was the first president of the United States to address the HBCU Week National Conference. He was the first president to permanently fund HBCUs for 10 years under the Future Act, which was a very, very important thing that a lot of members worked on and wanted to have happen on a bipartisan basis. They thought it wasn't going to be able to get done before the end of the year last year. And President Trump stepped in and worked out a deal with the Senate and got it done. And that was an important thing to do. When you look at the issues of the economy, this president has presided over the lowest unemployment numbers for the Black community in history. And even if we look at what happened after the coronavirus came from China, and as we all know, disproportionately impacted the Black community especially, we have still seen 5 straight months of decline in the Black unemployment numbers. Now, while the unemployment numbers are still high because of COVID, it's still a good sign that the numbers are continuing to go down. This president has been champion, in my opinion, on every issue that we care about, even the issue of law and order after the horrific murder of George Floyd. We looked to Washington, D.C., and a lot of people were protesting and crying out saying, we want action, we want change, we want something to be done. The only entity to do something has been the White House at the federal level, but President Trump's executive order for safe policing and for safe communities. Senator Tim Scott tried to push forth his plan to address a lot of these issues on use of force and things of that nature after George Floyd's death. But yet it's called the Justice Act. And Senator Dick Durbin, who is a senator out of Illinois, called it a token piece of legislation. And this was a bill, the Justice Act, that President Trump fully supported, and it said if passed by the Congress, he would sign it. That piece of legislation didn't go anywhere because the Democrats blocked it. In fact, there was a bipartisan meeting that was going to be held. That was actually held with Senator Tim Scott, Senator Cory Booker out of New Jersey, and Senator Kamala Harris from California. Senator Harris walked out of the meeting, refused to work with them in a bipartisan measure to get this done. So when it comes to that issue, the only person to actually get something done on there has been the president through his executive order. So I believe that this president has a track record, has a history of doing the right thing for our community. And then in addition, as we move forward, he has a platinum plan, is what it's called, as the sort of easy way of remembering it. But it's really the Black Economic Empowerment Plan. This contract with Black America for the second term is one that is a serious effort to have an infusion of capital for the Black community, and not just focusing on the economic security, but looking at safety and justice and better and cheaper healthcare options and education support. So it's a holistic plan. This is the same plan that we've seen a lot of people talk about in the media, because Ice Cube, as you know, Malik, had his own contract, and he reached out to both campaigns. And I bring up this story because it's important for your listeners to realize what happened. He reached out to both campaigns, not because he wanted to do something for himself, because he was trying to do something for the community. And he knew that in order to get something done, you should probably talk to the leaders of the two parties and who could be president of the United States, President Trump and Joe Biden. The Biden team told him, thanks, we'll take it up after the election. The Trump team said, thanks, let's have a meeting, let's listen to what you have to say, and actually incorporated some of his ideas in the president's Black Economic Empowerment Plan. And Ice Cube has been very forthright in the fact that he reached out, and the Trump administration took him seriously and listened and tried to incorporate things that they thought would align with what the president's vision is for empowering the Black community for the second term. That's what you want in leadership. You want to be able to listen, you want to be able to learn, you want to be able to act. And those are the things that I know President Trump and his entire team. And there's a lot of people on the team that look like me and that look like you, working at the White House, the campaign, the RNC, who understand this and are working every day to implement it.
So I think, you want to really park right there too, because for many, they believe that there's only a certain amount of talking heads that are African-American that are inside of the administration. You bring up a great point that there are more than just the ones that tend to make mainstream media. Going back to Ice Cube's conversation. Now, I know Cube is in a current dialogue, arguing back and forth with Democratic leaders, and he wants the Zoom call that was recorded to be released to confirm that he was told post-election, that they would have a conversation. But there's also arguments from other media outlets who suggest that this $500 billion that President Trump has allocated to the Black community would not essentially go to them. Can you dig further into this Black empowerment plan and talk about how that $500 billion would be allocated?
Yeah, so the important thing about the plan is that it is a holistic plan, because a lot of times we want to just say, let's just give a tax cut and think that's going to solve everything. And what I appreciate about the president's plan is that it is addressing more than just a purely economic issues. And so, but we cannot deny that for many small business owners, and Malik, I know you know this very well with the work that you do around the country and in Philadelphia especially, access to capital is a barrier to entry for a lot of people in our community. And so this $500 billion that we have allocated would come through the form of loanable funds from CDFIs and MDIs and Black-owned banks. And it would provide, public and private investment programs, including private equity plans and increased credit opportunities through non-traditional means, payment from rent and utilities, phone bills, because a lot of times people don't have, in our community, don't have established credit lines. Sure. And so the Trump administration wants to explore finding alternative ways for people to say that they have credit. If you're paying your rent every month, if you're paying your cell phone bill every month, you're paying your gas or your water bill every month, that is a way to show that you are diligent and faithful and could have access to these funds. And obviously the administration would continue to facilitate conversations with senior officials and other major, financial institutions to make sure that there are new equitable lending programs. Because one of the things that we found out because of COVID-19 was that even when it came down to getting the PPP funds out, and a lot of Black people, a lot of Black-owned business got PPP, but not enough did.
Right.
And it was because of non-traditional banking relationships, not having accounts and having relationships with big banks. So the second phase of the PPP allowed for these, CDFIs and Black-owned banks to actually get in there and become even more, have more liberty to access and distribute the funds. So when you saw Robert F. Smith and Magic Johnson put together their plan of getting out money, that was because they helped the government, the Trump administration designated them as a lending source so that Black-owned businesses could have access to, hundreds of millions of dollars, and more of that is going to be done. But that's how that stream of $500 billion in new capital for existing and new Black-owned businesses would come about. But in addition to that, Malik, you would have, the creation of about 500,000 new Black-owned businesses over the next 4 years, and about 3 million new jobs for the Black community over the next 4 years. One of the things I like to highlight is the government contracts, because a lot of people can become very successful with government contracts because, you want to have access to it. The church I went to in Los Angeles, West Angeles Church of God in Christ, Bishop Charles C. Blake, they're building a second phase of their campus, and they said 30% of the constructions will be given to minority contractors, and that's important. But in the existing structure, be approximately $500 billion in federal contracting that currently exists, and we want to expand that to get more opportunities from federal government contracts to Black-owned businesses. It'll be a deliberate effort to make that happen. And this is one thing that's really, really important. It's to minimize a lot of the regulatory burdens that are barriers, again, to entry, including fees and occupational licensing hurdles. I got my hair cut yesterday. No, I was coming like I could not come on your show and not have a fresh cut.
No doubt.
My haircut yesterday. Yeah. And my barber, he's not political. He's not, a Trump, Black Voices for Trump guy. He's just he's half Black, he's half Puerto Rican, entrepreneur, business savvy, young man. And he said, it takes more time for me to get a barber license, than it does to become a cop. But in terms of hours, he said that's crazy. And he was talking about just the hurdles it takes for the fees and the licensing issues to become a barber, knowing that a disproportionate amount of barbers are from our community. And so, with President Trump working with our governors to ensure that we have more ways to remove these burdens, these licensing fees, and these hurdles to entrepreneurship is part of how this Black economic empowerment plan can actually benefit and help our community. And the last thing is this: President Trump has no intention of raising taxes. That is the last thing that we need to have happen as we come out of COVID-19. And we know on the other side, Vice President Joe Biden has said that he would raise taxes now he says for those making above $400,000 a year. Now that's what he says. But he also in the same breath says that he would undo the president's tax cuts and Jobs Act. So all of the benefits and tax, benefit that came from that we all received would then go away. And then and what experts say is when you do impose a tax on those making 500,000 or 400,000 or more, and when you do undo the capital, the tax, the low taxes on corporations, then it goes down and gets passed on to the consumer, into the job employer, the employee.
Your businesses always find a way, or at least attempt to find a way to right size themselves, especially when they become tax burden. So you're spot on with that. As it relates to HBCUs, now there are positions out there that suggest that the previous administration, President Obama, put in place funding for HBCUs, and so this touting that the current president, President Trump, is taking care of HBCUs as an initiative on his own is false. And so can you dig into that positioning of HBCUs, how this funding has traveled, and more importantly, how President Trump plans to continue the relationship with our HBCUs?
No, absolutely. Look, when you look back at President Trump's time in office, we have to go back to February 2017. It was Black History Month, and we were at a round table in the cabinet room, and I was honored to be there. This is 1 month after taking the oath. And I told him then, I said, Mr. President, you have the ability to go down as one of the greatest champions for the Black community if you do a few things, one of which is be a supporter of school choice and HBCUs. And that led to a conversation in the moment about HBCUs. He said, who's the Harvard of HBCUs? Now, of course, there were a lot of Howard grads in there. There were some Morehouse men in there, so they had a debate between Morehouse and Howard. But ultimately, he said, how are HBCUs doing? What's their enrollment? What's their finances like? And what's their funding? And it was brought up that under President Obama's first budget, when he came in office, this was timely because President Trump's first budget was going to be coming out soon, HBCU funding was cut. And in that moment, President Trump became sort of like visibly like confused and kind of upset. He was like, wait, President Obama cut HBCU funding in his first budget? And he told Lynn Patton, it happens to be her birthday today, he told her, get the information, tweet it out, and I want to retweet it. That's exactly what he did. And from that conversation, this president listened and learned and got to know the HBCU presidents and chancellors that he invited all of them to the White House to meet with him, and the vice president, secretary of education, and all the senior staff. And he began to really tout their success and tout the importance of it. In the president's fiscal 2020 budget, there's $500 million in federal funding for school choice, and he signed school choice funding. Now, I bring up school choice because that's the pipeline. You got to support early to get to the pipeline to HBCUs. When it comes to the support that he's given, it's been historic. Like I mentioned before, the Future Act was something that they thought would not be able to get done. That provided permanent funding to the tune of $255 million in Title III Part F, which is a specific line, and it also increased funding for the Pell Grant program, which, I had Pell Grant when I was going to college as well. And estimates say that impact on HBCUs over the next 10 years, because of the Future Act's funding stream, would increase local spending to about $1.2 billion, creating about 11,000 new jobs in the communities that around and surround our HBCUs. So this president, working with the HBCU caucus, which is a bipartisan, bicameral caucus made up of Democrats and Republicans, has really pushed to get things done. A lot of times it takes the behind the scenes work to get things done. And when they knew that this president was going to back HBCUs and back funding for HBCUs and put forth his executive order on HBCUs, the earliest that it was ever done in decades, back in February of 2017, taking the executive director of HBCUs, the office, and from the education department, and putting it in the White House, and putting him, Jonathan Holyfield, on the Domestic Policy Council. Huge step. And
so park there for a minute. So he literally took that office, placed it inside the White House, and then placed it inside of policy. What does that do in reference to expansion of information or potential engagement from that office?
So what that does is it signals to the rest of the government, all the different agencies, that HBCUs are an important part of the domestic policy agenda of this White House. So much so that when domestic policy comes to policies are implemented or thought about, HBCUs are automatically part of the conversation. So you say, well, Paris, what does that mean in real time? Well, in real time, we've seen that when it came to rapid testing for COVID-19, there was a deal that was made to make sure that at right now, 31 HBCUs that are publicly supported will have rapid testing through Abbott Labs for their campuses, so that all students, administrators, and faculty members will have access to rapid testing, knowing the disproportionate impact of COVID on the community. And soon, when the private school program will be able to get done, it will go to them as well. The Department of Defense, the Pentagon, recently announced about a $10 million plan to work with HBCUs on AI technology. And so the executive order the president put together this interagency council of 32 departments and agencies in the federal government to ensure that they all are working to make sure that when allocations of resources and grants are done, you have a plan to support HBCUs. And when it came down for about $300 million in outstanding debt from the HBCUs that were negatively impacted because of Hurricane Katrina. Now let's pause all the way back to Hurricane Katrina. These 4 HBCUs that were in that region were fighting to get that debt eradicated because of the impact that it had on there. That happened under President Trump's watch, with President Trump working with Secretary of Education DeVos and HBCU caucus to make sure that happened. The budget that he passed allowed for $10 million to be deferred in loan payments for 6 schools that were facing financial hardships. Because what was going to happen is if they didn't defer those payments, the schools were going to close down because they just could not afford to do it. So the president and having this office in the White House and under the Domestic Policy Council has really led to making HBCUs a priority. And here's the last point on this, Malik. When President Trump touts HBCUs in almost all of his speeches, no matter where he is, no matter the crowd, that's done before the national media. And so when you have HBCUs a part of the conversation on big newspapers, major television, cable outlets, international affairs programs, what's HBCUs? What are they? Who are they? Who are the students? That helps drive attention. That has helped to lead when the president's tax cuts happened. Boeing gave millions of dollars to an HBCU organization and the then CEO said because of the tax cut, and the community said, well, what do you want to do with the money? They said, we're going to create a program to create a pipeline into corporate America. And they partnered with HBCUs because they have been on the forefront. I dare say that the Joe Biden team would not have been so aggressively going after HBCU support had it not been for President Trump making HBCU support, both in word and in deed, such a priority for his administration. So that has driven up enrollment, that has driven up donations, that has driven up attention in a positive way for these schools.
Well, it's clear that Black America and the education of Black America has become a hot button here. I want to dig into the law and order conversation because
it's important.
Law and order is a major topic for Black America. You know this as I do as well. Here in Philadelphia, we just had a recent shooting, police officer involved shooting, Walter Willis, and the conversation of defund the police, which, in all fairness, that has become an overly politicized phrase, right? And many are suggesting, in a more balanced perspective, that defunding simply means providing resources beyond the weapons, the armory that has been supplied to local forces, whether that be non-lethal applications, whether it be therapy that exists or crisis hotlines that are fully staffed and ready to be deployed. Where does President Trump stand on those kind of conversations with the African American community? Because many will say that law and order simply has become a dog whistle for the suppression of Black America with law enforcement.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing this up, Malik. I think, and especially the situation going on in the city now is really, really unfortunate. President Trump has a unique perspective on this because of his background as a developer, his background as someone who has worked with city governments to build things, infrastructure, buildings, property. He's kept payroll. And so when he sees the destruction of buildings and entrepreneurs' livelihoods literally go up in flames, he understands what that costs, because he knows what it costs and what it could have cost these people to make sure their business was thriving, especially in underserved communities. It's tough. And so when the president saw for many months the destruction of Black-owned businesses, it really, really hit him, because he knew that if these businesses could survive through the shutdown because of COVID-19's global impact, if they were able to get, PPP loans, if they're able to, use innovation and technology to change their business model to survive in this new economy, and to do all these things, and to then have their business destroyed because of some looters and Antifa, or and some ridiculous people wanting to make a point by destroying property, he said that has to end. And so the reason why President Trump is so strong on the issue of law and order and public safety is because he knows that you have to clamp down on that to get control of the city, so that property is not destroyed or looted, and so that lives are not hurt in the process, because we have seen deaths occur in these struggles. When it comes to defunding the police, the president is against that notion, because any reduction or taking away of resources, financial resources, from the work that needs to be done within the police department, in the president's opinion, will make these vulnerable cities less safe, because the police need all of the training, all of the resources, all of the tools that they can to ensure that they do keep the community safe. There have been multiple polls that show that the Black community, even a Gallup poll, which is not particularly partisan, shows that the Black community for several years, and even this year, does not want a reduction in police presence, that we want to have at least the same, or if not more, because we want to make sure that our families are kept safe, that our communities and our properties are kept safe. So that's why the president is so strong and so adamant about public safety in the process of people wanting justice. The president said after George Floyd's death, in his major address in Florida, after a lot of the rioting had taken place, he said that he understands that why people are protesting, and that people should be protesting because they're upset. And he said there are a lot of good people protesting, but the president put a line in the sand and said, but there has to be a limit in terms of where we take our actions. And when we take our frustrations and our act and those actions become deadly or violent or destruction of property, especially in the Black community, that is something that goes too far.
So I want to shift the conversation into the West Wing and then pull it back out into Eisenhower and start talking about staff. And so from the West Wing perspective, does the president truly understand the frustration of many Black Americans when they hear a comment, Proud Boys stand back and stand by, and what the media reports that as and how that gets presented to the African American community as a whole? Does the president feel that some of his stances around the looters, because we all know, if we're following not just particular mainstream media, but following all the footage, that yes, there may be some African Americans in the space, but there are many of other races that are looting, that are instigating, that are starting some of these issues, but African Americans are getting blamed in many ways for the majority of it in local publications and press. Does he understand those dynamics, how that's impacting, and how some of those comments land on Black America?
Well, I think the president understands that a lot of the things that he says gets put through a false narrative and a tainted lens because of the mainstream media always wanting to apply race and make sure that anything the president does or says is perceived to be negative to the Black community. I believe that the president is very knowledgeable about the impact of what is going on in America's cities. He has staff. He's lived it. He's in his 70s, so he's seen it before, and he knows what this impact does on entrepreneurs and business people. When it comes to the issue of who is actually the culprits of a lot of this, there's no doubt the president keeps continually to call out Antifa and those radical leftist anarchists are in many ways infiltrating the peaceful protests that do happen and take advantage of the despair and the hurt of a lot of people in our community and get them riled up. And they do infiltrate, they hide their face, and they go in. A lot of them they were harassing at the Republican National Convention. They were out there harassing, elderly convention goers and just regular people, even Black Republicans walking the streets. And they were Antifa. They did not look like me. They did not look like you. So that's why the president's Black Economic Empowerment Plan also calls for Antifa and the KKK to be labeled terrorist organizations. You already called that for Antifa, because we know that a lot of those people are taking advantage of this situation in a negative way. But at the same time, when you have the Black Lives Matter organization, not the movement, but the organization, leaders saying that they are trained Marxists and they want to have the destruction of the Black nuclear family as a part of their platform. And we know that we've seen some of those people, a part of that organization, do things that are not good in the name and tarnishing the name of the many Black people who are peacefully protesting. You have to call it out, and Democrats have to call it out as well, not be afraid to do that. That's why he's held them accountable. And on the issue of what the president says, look, I believe, if you brought up the Proud Boys moment, I think the president misspoke when he said stand by. I have watched the president for 4 years now, and I know that he likes to repeat himself and say things in a certain cadence, like similar to what pastors do. And so when he said the only reason why he used the phrase stand down was because Chris Wallace asked, will you tell the Proud Boys to stand down? If you go back to other instances when he was asked about hate groups and white supremacists, reporters would say, or journalists would say, Mr. President, will you denounce? Will you disavow? And he would say, yes, I denounce. Yes, I disavow. He uses the phrase that the people ask him to use in the moment. And that's why he first said, stand down. Yeah. Then I believe he went on and misspoke when he said stand by. I thought he meant to say stand back, stand down, stand back. But at the end of the day, the next day, he forcefully on Fox News said again, I believe this is the president who has denounced hate groups and white supremacists and KKK and David Duke more than any president in history, both before he was president, while he was a candidate, and as president of the United States. And he did it again and denounced the Proud Boys. But what I did not hear, Malik, was Joe Biden denounce Antifa. I did not hear Kamala Harris Senator Harris come out and denounce, Senator Durbin calling the Justice Act a token legislation. I did not hear her denounce some of the things that come out of the mouths that are specifically hurtful, like when MSNBC said that every Black Republican that came on the stage at the convention was a part of a Black minstrel show. That included Tim Scott, that included Clarence Henderson, that included Alex Johnson. So we have to just be, this is why the president gets so upset and defensive, I think, when they say that he has not denounced it, because the facts are he has. every time, multiple times, and he doubles down on his disavowing, denouncing, and orders to tell them to stop what they're doing.
I really get challenged, separate of the president, but I get challenged when Black America calls each other's names.
Yeah.
In these kind of spaces. Brookings Institute talks about 2040. If we don't chart a new course, median income wealth will go down to almost $5.40. I mean, really. So there's no time for us to ever degrade each other,
right.
Whether there's a difference of opinions, whether there's a path that we all take collectively. Nonetheless, doing that and doing it in the media and social media, I think is going to lead to a far greater detriment than we've ever seen. And so talk about the staff, because many will say, outside of Omarosa, outside of Paris Dennard, there are no Black people in the White House, or no Black folk who are in the administration, in the EOB, doing the work. Talk about African Americans, their presence in the current administration, and are they in positions of influence and power, or are they just role positions?
Yeah, so I think that's a very important question. From the very beginning, you've had people like Jaron K. Smith. He is from Cleveland, Ohio. Jaron is a two-time HBCU grad. He worked for Senator Tim Scott on the Hill. He's had various positions in the White House, but right now he is in the West Wing as the highest ranking Black official in the White House, as the Deputy Assistant to the President and Deputy Director of the Office of American Innovation. And that's a commissioned officer position. So Jaron Smith is there. Scott Turner, who is the Executive Director of the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, is there. And that council really has been tasked by the president to really tackle a lot of the disparities that were unearthed because of COVID-19 and find ways and resources to really address that. So a lot of the things that are being done in terms of getting PPE equipment and resources and opportunities for these underserved communities and HBCUs and things of that nature, and health disparities like sickle cell, diabetes, things like that the president has tackled, are coming through this office, this director, Scott Turner's the council, and additionally, the council is really the umbrella for a lot of the Opportunity Zone work, and we know Opportunity Zones in just 2 years have put in $75 billion worth of capital. You have and I mentioned her earlier, Lynn Patton, mm-hmm. Regional Administrator for the Department of HUD in New York, and she's doing a mighty work with public housing issues in New York, and some of her efforts were highlighted at the convention. You have David Byrd, who is the let me just stay in the White House, like you said. So you have Jaron K. Smith, you have Jonathan Holyfield, who is the Executive Director of the White House HBCU Council, which is part of the DPC. You have Scott Turner, who I just mentioned. You have the head of the Tony Loudon, the Executive Director for the Federal Interagency Council on Crime Prevention and Improving Reentry. That's the office that is really focused on the president's criminal justice reform and First Step Act and Second Step Act efforts is coming through there. You have Nicole Frazier, Special Assistant to the President and Director of Strategic Partnerships and African American Outreach, a position that I held in the Bush administration. She is out there making the connections with not only churches, but also nonprofits and community organizations and organizational leaders in the Office of Public Liaison at the White House. So those are some of the people that are there present in the White House itself. Jaron in the West Wing, and in the building next door, I'm getting down in the weeds, but it's called the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, that's still in the complex itself. Most people that say they work in the White House work in the Eisenhower Building. The vice president's entire staff, in the Eisenhower Building, and so they are there. When you go outside of the White House itself, you have the administration. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Secretary Ben Carson at HUD. You have Jerome Adams, who is our Surgeon General. You have David Byrd, who is the National Director for the Minority Business Development Agency at the Department of Commerce, where inside of the President's Black Economic Empowerment Plan, he calls for MBDA to be permanently funded. And he also calls for that position that David Byrd currently has to be elevated to an Assistant Secretary of Commerce position and not just a National Director position, elevating his influence. You have Rodney Hood, a Black gentleman who's the first Black person to be the chairman of the National Credit Union Administration. You have Jackie Hayes Byrd, who's the executive director of the VA, which is the Veterans Administration Center for Women Veterans. Very, very important. A lot of people forget we have so many amazing women that serve in the military and that are veterans. And so Jackie Hayes Byrd, a Black woman, taking control of that. Aurelia Skipwith, she is the first woman to be the director of the United States Fish and Wildlife Services. So not something that a lot of urban cities will know a lot about, but some of our rural cities and states have some rural areas. I know Pennsylvania does as well. You know, her position as the director of the Fish and Wildlife Service is pretty important to what the administration is doing. And then in the press shop, a little known fact, you have young Black men, Harrison Fields and James Drummond, who are both assistant press secretaries working for Kayleigh McEnany, and they were new additions to the White House. And one thing I would like to say, Senator Harris at the debate with Vice President Pence said that the president had not appointed any Black Americans to the federal bench. And she did this on purpose. She narrowed it down to a specific appellate court, which is true. But what was not true is that he didn't appoint any Blacks to the federal bench. He did. He's appointed about 8 Black Americans to serve at various levels on the federal bench, but not just at the one particular court that she singled in to make a talking point. So it wasn't fully honest. And the last thing I like to say is this: when you look at the Heritage Foundation, the largest, most significant conservative Republican think tank in the world, it is headed up by a Black woman who is a supporter of the president's. She's had past services in different White Houses and in the state of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Kay Coles James is the first woman and first Black woman to be a Black person to be the head of a Heritage Foundation. Then at the RNC and at the campaign, there are also Black leaders in senior positions. Myself at the RNC, my colleague Kevin Daniels in the political division at the RNC, our chief operating officer at the RNC, Tina Jackson. On the campaign at the senior level, you have Katrina Pearson, who's been there since 2016. She's now a senior advisor. You have Harrison Floyd, who is the director of Black Voices for Trump, and Gail Wilson, executive director for Black Voices for Trump. So we have people, and these are just a few, and then there's hundreds, if not thousands, that are in the administration as Schedule C appointees as well. But right. These are some of the leaders that are there in different agencies and different offices in the White House, all working together to advance the cause and the mission of what this president plans to do.
So you brought up Senator Harris's comment around the federal appointments. Does the president have in his agenda a desire, or quite frankly, an initiative to diversify some of these federal appointees? I mean, when we look at 8 versus 150 plus over, the last few years and climbing, will we see an increase in diversity in the federal judicial levels and appointments?
Yeah, I think that the challenge is this. The challenge is having is identity, and the challenge is it's on people like myself to help amplify an ID and get these people who are Black Americans who identify as conservative or align with the president's vision for the country and the vision on justice, being a strict constitutional jurist. Yeah. And our task is to find, they're there. We just have to do a better job at identifying them to get them on the bench, because the president does not believe in quotas. He doesn't believe in just putting people in positions just because they are a woman or black. He wants, if you're qualified, if you're talented, if you do the work and you align with my vision for the future and for the country to make it great again for all people, then let's sign you up. He doesn't care if you're, black, white, Hispanic, gay, straight, Pentecostal, he does not care. What he cares about is, are you qualified? So the onus is on people like me and others to help identify more of those people who align with his vision, to make sure that they are put in positions, not just on the federal bench, but also all throughout the government.
Will you make that commitment to Black America to identify those qualified individuals and at least get them to the table as the years pass, considering there's a re-election?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, one of my projects I did at the RNC was to try to shine a light on the 30 plus Black Republicans who are running for Congress, because I wanted America to know that it's not just John James in Michigan who gets a lot of the attention, or Byron Donalds or Kimberly Klasick, because of the great ad that she put out. There are about 30 Black Republicans running for Congress, and I have put them out there and I'm always finding ways to get them attention, to get them profiled, because I want them to be able to have a shot at winning this election and getting more attention and getting more money, and making sure the White House and other offices know that these people exist, that they're running, and that if they win, that's great. We want more of them. If they lose, let's keep them engaged. That's one of the things that I have always tried to do and doing right now. And I do pledge to work to identify those persons who want to serve.
So last question, Paris, is there a commitment for engagement in not just Black Republican friendly areas or Black Republican friendly groups, but to engage all of the electorate, provided that there is a re-election on November 3rd, a commitment from you and others to ensure that there's real conversation happening? Many believe sometimes it turns into a media opportunity. Is there going to be a conversation where the cameras go off and the ears perk up so that the real stories from the ground are brought from the street to the White House and dealt with?
Yeah, and you know what? I just wrote an op-ed about that, and I think it appeared in Town Hall, and it's already been done. Right before the president was sworn in, the transition team had a meeting that took place in Washington, D.C. at the American Enterprise Institute, and they had well over 100 people represented from a host of organizations, Black organizations all across the country. They were not all Republican or conservative leaning. They were liberal. There were nonprofits. Noble was there, NAACP, Urban League, National Action Network, 100 Black Women, National Council of Negro Women. I mean, it was a Heritage Foundation. Everybody was there. And so that was how we started the administration with the listening session. When it came to the formulation of the Black Economic Empowerment Plan that the president has put forth for the second term, it wasn't something that was done just the last few weeks of the election. They've been working on this for well over a year, and they met with had over 500 some odd, meetings, over 1,000 some odd people, calls, conferences, meetings, not just at the White House, but in cities and with organizations on the ground who are actually doing the work. It is a comprehensive plan because they took a comprehensive look at it in terms of listening and working with people that aren't all aligned with the Republican Party, but they are aligned with the advancement and the empowerment of the Black community. And that is why they were at the table. And that's something that the president always says. I don't care who you are or where you come from or what your political affiliations. If you want to work with me to get things done, let's do it. That's why Van Jones is at the table for criminal justice reform. That's why Kim Kardashian was at the table for criminal justice reform. That's why Vernon Jones was at the table, who's a Democrat state representative out of Georgia. That's why Leo Terrell is helping out right now, a longtime Democrat civil rights leader. And so I believe 100% that type of engagement, that type of representation will continue with this administration, because that's how President Trump is. That's how he's always governed. And that's how this administration has carried out itself and has come up with a lot of these policies and plans, especially on things when dealing with justice, have come about because of bipartisanship, reaching across the aisle, and being on the ground in the community with people willing to work with the administration.
Paris, I've got to go, but I appreciate you.
Thank you
for sitting down and breaking down the positions and, quite frankly, the policy. I think it's important that folk know policy, how it's going to impact them, and be able to have a digestible size conversation about it. And so we're going to tap you again post, November 3rd and have some further conversation. But I appreciate you and all that you do.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for the work that you do. These platforms are important, and I know you're moving the needle for those free-thinking, independent-minded Black Americans and all Americans who just want to get things done and have action, not just talk or rhetoric, but let's be about action and coming together. And this is part of doing it with the Vision 2020 and HeartCity.
Thank you, brother. Take care. So you have heard from Paris Dennard. He broke down what's happening in the White House. He broke down the policies that we've seen in the media, the conversations that have existed around those policies, the president's position. We had a conversation, quite frankly, about the president's comprehension of Black America and its response to some of the language and conversation that has been used and placed in the landscape. But there's more conversation to be had in this final episode of Vision 2020. This brother here, Mark Little, he is Black Voices for Trump Advisory Board member. Mark, it's great to have you on HeartCity. Welcome home, brother.
Brother, it is so good to be with you. And I've been listening, and what Paris has shared with you and your audience is just extraordinary. And I'm so glad to be with you on HeartCity.
So Mark, let's get into this, man. You have one of the hottest seats in the country. I mean, Black Voices for Trump. There's visceral reaction, right? Some folk are going, yes, I get it. I love it. I understand it. On the other side, there's many challenges, frustration, and quite frankly, America has become this polarized space anyway. Tell the broadcast audience why you support Donald Trump for presidency.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I can tell you that I have been a conservative for a long time, a conservative before I've been a Republican or a Donald Trump supporter. And as a conservative and as a pastor and a lawyer, by the way, there are certain core values for me that I prioritize. I prioritize the life of the unborn, obviously in the womb. But I believe in a womb to the tomb policy. I believe that we have to stand against illegal immigration. I think you know that the Obama administration's Civil Rights Commission found that illegal immigration most and disproportionately impacts Black workers. And so I stand for a nation that is sovereign, a nation with borders. I stand for more jobs. I stand for making sure that people have the opportunity to wake up every day and with the power of their mind and their hands are able to create their own destiny. And that means that government has to play its proper role. The bigger that government is and the more that it makes people like you and me dependent, the weaker we are. You might know that in 1987, I was shot. I was shot by a Crip in Los Angeles and I lost my leg. I was given the opportunity to have a disability check that would have paid my rent for a time to come. I decided that having my rent paid by the government was not the road for me, that I wanted more out of life. And that's the kind of policy that Donald Trump stands for. If you can get up in the morning and decide that you want to work, you want to get an education, and you want to make something of yourself, really government needs to get out of your way to do that. Government can't create your destiny. And so I was happy to be able to go to law school and make something of my life, to get an education and to work hard. And that's the kind of environment that Americans need today. An environment that stands for life, an environment that stands for government playing its proper role so that as Americans we can flourish. And that's the kind of environment that Donald Trump has created. And so when Donald Trump came along and he said to Hillary Clinton and to all of America that he's going to stand against a taxpayer-funded abortion, he got my vote. When he understood and said that as a businessman, he knows how to create jobs, or at least create the environment for jobs. Government doesn't create jobs, right? Small businesses create jobs. Government gets out of the way. And so Donald Trump deregulated our environment that created the space for the small business owner to create. He under the Donald Trump presidency, you might know, manufacturing jobs grew 714% faster under his administration. These are the kinds of things that we need to be successful. And so I gravitated happily toward the Donald Trump presidency. And as we look back, we see that not only did he do that for the country before the pandemic hit, but he did that for the African-American community.
Now, you bring up a great point that I think is really important to park in the notes of this broadcast. Government does not create jobs, and this is not a partisan conversation. I need people to understand government does not create jobs. It either accelerates the creation of it or decelerates and causes those jobs to actually leave. And so those policies, taxes, tax plans all make a difference in what's going to happen in the space. For Black America, Mark, you know this well. Things are not happening and moving the way that they should. Many will claim and say, quite frankly, that the Obama administration gave millions of jobs to the country. And in this current space, we're now seeing a deficit and potential collapse of the economy under President Trump. You and I both know that that's happening in conversations in Black America, whether it be the church or the barbershop. What would you say to those individuals who have that mindset, who are listening and watching the broadcast?
Sure. Thank you so much. You know, it's interesting because there's two things happening. You have the wealth gap between whites and blacks. It's been huge and has been historically very wide. And then you have the workforce participation numbers. And so what I'd like for us to do is to focus on what happened before the pandemic, because the entire globe has been impacted by what has come out of China. Before the pandemic hit, we had one of the highest workforce participation rates in recent history. And for the Black community, we had the lowest unemployment rate in recorded history, both for African Americans and for African American teenagers, which has been historically high. And so the question becomes, well, why is that? And like you just said, we have to look at the policies that this president has put in place that allowed that. And so often we ignore the fact that illegal immigration has an impact on that. And we have no Black leaders, as we talk in our barbershops, we had no Black leaders who are standing up and saying, we need to stand against these caravans. We need to stand against the barrage of folks coming across our border, taking jobs. I think it's really important to underscore that since President Trump has been in office and all the flack that he took with the bans for people coming into our country illegally, it has worked for the African American community. And the manufacturing jobs that President Obama said there is no magic wand to make those jobs come back from being offshore, the jobs that he and Joe Biden so willingly shipped across our shores. They came back in droves. And those things helped to bring those numbers down for African Americans. 5.1% unemployment rate for African Americans as of December of 2019. The lowest in recorded history. And so I want people to understand that we have to look at what has happened under his watch before we were rolled over by the pandemic. Now, since the pandemic, We've had almost 11 million jobs come back, and most of the country is still on lockdown. Can you imagine what's going to happen when we reopen under a Donald Trump presidency as opposed to a Biden presidency? Mr. Biden has been clear that he is going to follow the quote unquote science that says we may be locking this country down again. I remind people under the CDC, there is a 99.99% recovery rate if you are 0 to 70 years old. And there is about a 94% recovery rate if you're 70 and over. And comorbidities, of course,
also provided that you don't have any pre-existing conditions as well. I think it's important. Yeah.
The comorbidities have a play into that. Obviously, if you've got diabetes, if you've got cancer and those sorts of things, it's impacted greatly. And by the way, those are the populations that are most vulnerable that we absolutely have to protect. We have to wear a mask. I'm here in Las Vegas right now with my father, who the world knows has cancer. My father's Floyd Little, played for the Denver Broncos, and he has cancer. And so I'm here having tested negative for COVID, wearing a mask when necessary to make sure that he's protected. And we have to do that for our loved one. And so there's a role to play for wearing masks, but we can't ignore the science that our Democrat friends say that we should follow. And the science says is that there's nearly a 100% recovery rate for those who are not in the vulnerable category. And so all I'm trying to say, though, back to your point, is that under Donald Trump presidency, we have experienced a record economy for the nation, and a record unemployment rate for African Americans. We can't ignore that. That's the fact. And so I'm looking forward to Donald Trump making America great again as we come out of this pandemic. We are turning the corner. The rate that we should be looking at is not how many new cases we have, because we know we're testing more than anybody in the globe. What we have to look at are the deaths and the hospitalizations. And those rates are the ones to look at. There are spikes, obviously, but ultimately that's what we have to look at to determine how we reopen our nation. We have to reopen our nation. We have to see a bright future ahead of us. I'm talking to those in the barbershop and in our churches. There is a bright future for us, but we cannot live in a spirit of fear. That is not going to be the recipe that's going to bring us back from this very horrible, horrible pandemic. A spirit of hope, a spirit of being willing to get back into life and to recover from this. Our small businesses are hurting. They're closing. The mobs that have burned down our cities are going to have an impact on our small businesses coming back. But together we can do it, and we will do it. And the president and our local government and our mayors, our governors are going to have a big role to play in coming back from this pandemic and from the mobs who have burned out a lot of our small businesses.
Let's talk about law enforcement, because I think law enforcement is a big issue for Black America. I mean, if we're going to be honest about it, those slave patrols literally matriculated into what we now know as police forces and law enforcement. Black America still has not found itself comfortable with neither policy or, in some cases, the conditions by which community and law enforcement engage. When they hear law and order, in many cases, it becomes a dog whistle for a supremacist mindset. Officers who do not live in the community now engage in the community in a top-down, hard thumb-nose approach. And so many, when they hear the concept of law and order ever emanate from the mouth of the president, they turn off, because in their mindset, he is responsible for driving the narrative. They're driving what's happening in the community, and as it relates to community and engagement between these officers. What would you say to Black community members? And obviously here in Philadelphia, we just had an officer involved shooting. So tensions are high. There are things going on in the space. But what would you say to the general thought around law and order in the Black community?
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's such an important question, Malik. You've got looting going on right now as we speak in your city, and I have to tell you, I'm so glad to be able to speak to it because it's a bifurcated issue. You've got the federal response, and then you've got the local response.
Yeah.
You've got a president who has worked with Senator Tim Scott to try to put bipartisan legislation together, but on his own, he implemented an executive order that banned the chokehold and so many other things. He gets it, and he is responding from his perch, if you will. But the real reality is twofold. I want people to understand that number one, law enforcement, there are some 18,000 agencies across our nation, and they are managed by local government. They're managed in many cases by mayors and chiefs of police, many of whom are Black and they are Democrat in most of our urban centers. And what people need to understand is that they are responsible for electing the leaders over them, over us. We are responsible for holding our mayors, our chiefs of police, and our police departments accountable to us. And if we're not engaged at the local level in saying to those mayors, to those city council members, and ultimately to those chiefs of police, that we need our officers to have community policing. There's a theory that you may know of called broken windows, where we are really in partnership with local policing, that we are a part of that process, and we need to hold them accountable to keep us a part of that process. There are commissions where local community members sit and bring accountability to our police forces, and we have a role to play. The role is not always sitting outside of the glass, if you will, and shouting inward. We need to be inside, bringing about the change that we're talking about. I was a part of that in Los Angeles, where we brought body cameras to play in local policing. It's important that we step up and play the role that we need to play as members of our community. That's number one. Number two, it's important to understand what's happening with policing in context. We have so often in this season followed a false narrative. Now, I want to be very clear. Anytime one African American is shot, the Tamir Rices of the world, the Eric Gardners of the world who are choked and can't breathe, the George Floyds of the world who lost his life because of a knee on his neck. We have to stand against those injustices. As a lawyer who has done criminal justice work, I understand that as a need, but it's complicated because we had a crime bill in 1994 that Joe Biden authored and promoted that put us away for a third strike that was nonviolent, that was drug related, or for stealing pizza. We have to understand our role in the legislative process. We have to understand the narrative in our role when you have in 2019, 13 unarmed Black men and one woman who were shot by police. 13 unarmed. And we have leaders, Malik, who are trying to lead us to believe that we're being lynched and shot in the streets of America without cause. And so we have to do the work to understand what's really happening in our communities. One life lost is one life too many. But I don't want us to follow behind Pied Pipers who have an agenda. And the agenda, frankly, has not been to protect our lives. 81% of African Americans polled want more law enforcement. But you wouldn't know that if you're listening to the quote unquote leaders in our community who want us to believe that we're being lynched and gunned down in the streets of America. The most vulnerable among us are elderly, are handicapped, our youth who are going to and fro from from schools, God willing, when we get from this pandemic, who have to go through gang-infested communities, need law enforcement. We can't stand down and act like law enforcement doesn't play a role in the safety in our communities. It does, but we do need to stand for better training. We need to stand for officers who look like us and who are from our community, who get us. And that is something that we need to stay on the target. We need to continue to push that. But the idea that we have to have less law enforcement is only going to leave us more vulnerable, and we have to stand against that.
Do you feel that President Trump will keep a commitment, keep his word to Black America? Obviously, we know Ice Cube sat down with him. Paris talked about the fact that, and I believe this too, that Ice Cube did not go to grab anything for himself or to accumulate anything for his own. I do believe that he represented the interest of Black America in both meetings. Nonetheless, there was a plan. It was called the Platinum Plan. I necessarily don't agree with the term platinum, but nonetheless, there was a term used in reference to a plan specifically for Black America. Do you feel that that commitment will be kept and the dollars will hit home where it needs to in the Black community?
Great question, man, and thank you for it, because it's an easy answer. You know a tree by its fruit. You have to forgive me as a pastor. You know, I look at the world through a biblical worldview. You know a tree by its fruit. When he was a candidate, Donald Trump said, Black America, what do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? Because the Democrats for now more than 50 years have been promising us change, and our communities have not changed. But guess what? They have gotten far richer than they were when they entered office. They're the ones who have benefited from the last 50 years. Our communities have not. Donald Trump said, what do you have to lose? And what is the fruit from that tree? And Paris may have touched on this, but the fruit from the tree has been the Futures Act, where our historically Black colleges and universities were failing. They were on lifelines. And Donald Trump, through the Futures Act, gave them long-term funding, $250 million, $300 million in forgiveness in debt. 250,000 students, most of them Black, were the beneficiaries of that. The First Step Act, 91% of those who were in federal prison who are now out, who had life sentences, 91% of them were African Americans. And they're sitting around the tables of our families, being fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters again. That's Donald Trump keeping his promise. And so the Platinum Plan, and I agree with you, I'm not sure where he came up with the word platinum, right? But it offers $500 billion in commitments to small businesses to have access to capital. Guess what? That's what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was talking about the week before he was assassinated. An economic plan for African Americans. This is the closest thing that I've heard in recent history that will speak to that dream that Dr. King was talking about. And by the way, in the Platinum Plan, churches are allowed to compete for federal dollars where they never were before. And guess what? That's what Donald Trump already did for historically Black colleges and universities under his executive order. He lifted the ban that was placed on faith-based schools who were unable to compete and request those kinds of funds. So he's already doing what he plans in the Platinum Plan. He's talking about 3 million new jobs for African Americans. He's talking about 500,000 new businesses, Black businesses. Can you imagine a new Black Wall Street? Can you imagine the Black Wall Street that was burned down in Greensboro being supported by this administration to come back for our community to stand strong again? Black Wall Street was the epicenter of our country for Black culture at that time in the early 1900s. It's that kind of commitment that Donald Trump is making. I don't understand how African Americans can say no to that, particularly when the Democrat Party, unfortunately, said to Ice Cube, I'll talk to you about that after the election. No, now is the time to talk about it when we're voting on this stuff. Now is the time to step up and make the commitment. Now is the time to say to African Americans, we're going to bring you along. We've been promising it for too long. Here is the plan for African America. We don't have that from the Democrat Party, but we do have that from Donald Trump, who, by the way, has already made promises made, and promises have been kept. That's what we need to be focusing on. African Americans need to stop thinking about party and start voting our self-interest. We need to stop thinking party and start voting our self-interest. Donald Trump has made promises and he's kept them. That's what we need to be looking at.
Listen, I will always be one to say that we should make sure that our agenda is kept no matter who is in office. That's the only way that we will accumulate power and keep power. Also, I firmly believe that power does not concede to anything without demand, but it's still not finished there. It's demand and consequence. If we don't have the consequences, nothing changes. I don't care who's in office. 30 seconds, Mark. As we close this interview, the broadcast audience is listening. What do you want to tell them about November 3rd?
Well, again, thank you so much. It's really a joy to speak to you and to your listeners here. Look, we've got the most consequential election of our lifetime. African Americans are a conservative community. Life is on the ballot. Capitalism is on the ballot. If you look behind Joe Biden's plans, he's promoting a different America. Don't vote party, vote your interest. Our country and our families depend on it. I'm praying for you. I'm blessing you. I'm thanking you for the opportunity to be with you. God bless you. And thank you so much.
Mark Little, the Black Voices for Trump Advisory Board member. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you and all you do.
Have me back, brother.
Yes, sir. Will do. So you have heard from Mark Little, Black Voices for Trump Advisory Board member. He broke it down. Look, here's why I choose to support. Here's why I have decided to make the move that I'm making to engage the community in this way. I mean, he stood firm on his positions and then broke them down accordingly. You heard his thoughts around the Platinum Plan or Black Economic Plan coming out of the White House. He also talked about the need for us to focus on a bigger scale around politics, taking some of the emotion out of it and making sure that an agenda is accomplished across the board. Earlier to his interview, you heard from Paris Dennard, who also spoke in that same vein. Here's where we are. You've heard from the Democrats, and now you have heard from the Republican Party. I need you to share this show as you have shared the others, because it's important for all of the information to get out. I'm not telling you who to vote for. I am telling you, you need to vote. Do not allow someone else to make a decision for you. This is your time to speak up and speak out about all the injustices that you have felt, all the injustices that you have faced, all of the issues that our community still struggles with, despite promises, no matter what side they have come from. The fact of the matter is, we have not grown. Brookings Institute says very clearly, by 2040, we are scheduled to have a median income of $5.40 per household. I'm telling you, whatever decision you make, you need to make a decision. Get involved, get active. More importantly, get in that booth and vote. Now, I wanted to add this component to this show because we always try to balance out, and shout out to Kendall Chase, our talent producer, and the team at Heart City for making sure that we have a balanced show. We love art, we love culture, we love music. For those who know, we did not even add the Black History fact or the song of the week today. Why? Because you need to hear this information. And more importantly, the next guest, this brother here, I am excited not only to see what his work has done for speaking to the community, speaking to the world as a whole. I'm excited to call him family. He is my cousin, but more importantly, he is one of the most instrumental voices, I believe, in art today. His installations create conversations, not just locally, but around the country. For those who are here in Philadelphia, you know his work well. The Afro pic that sat next to the Rizzo statue that spoke volumes about the issues that we were facing, the one that we took photos around and began to hold our fists up high, begin to talk about Black economic power and what needs to happen in the community, the piece that created conversation and helped to shape conversation around Black art installation in the city of Philadelphia and Black artists and what that looked like. He is the creator of that said piece, none other than Hank Willis Thomas. It is an absolute pleasure having you on Heart City. Welcome home, Hank. We can't hear you. Hold on, let me get you. Unmute your mic.
Thank you so much, Malik. It's great to be here with you, man.
Hey, there you go, man. Good to see you again. Look, I am excited, man, because this is a long time coming. I am a fan of your work. It's needed at a time like this. You know, music and art has really helped to shape our consciousness. And really bring us into a broader scale. Your pieces do exactly just that. Talk about the history. I mean, I can cheat a little bit. I have somewhat of a cheat sheet of how, you know, your world has shaped up. But tell the broadcast audience how you got here to this space. I mean, what inspired you to go into art?
Well, wow, that says a lot. I didn't realize that the light was so bad when I came. Let's just turn it around a little bit. Well, I think we come from a rich tradition of storytellers, you know, within our family specifically, but also within the African American community, and that we have always known the power of symbolism to share messages to the community without being overt, and the complexity of the messages that can be told through art, you know, as whether it be the African American quilt making tradition, whether it be through dance or through music, there are always multi layers of communication happening. And my mother, as you know, Deborah Willis, is a photographer and art historian who recognized that photography was a really powerful tool, not only to record the stories of our community, but also to celebrate the beauty. You know, that we forget that there was a time in America where it was an oxymoron to say that you were Black and beautiful. Yeah. You know, and that we had to, through self-love and community gathering, you know, prove to ourselves and show to the rest of the world that we know our beauty. And my work as an artist and I guess you could say as an activist has always been around elevating my own sense of self and encouraging others to value ourselves in ways that society hasn't always done.
And to see art reach the level that it has. I mean, the accolades that you have received, obviously, I know you feel that it's not just about you, but the collective and that collective energy in which you ride. But Vanity Fair has you on the cover, right? I mean, this is major to see for a visual artist. Talk about the feeling of looking at a cover like Vanity Fair and understanding that your work, blending that activism with that creative spirit, is now reaching worldwide proportion.
It's humbling, you know. I mean, you know where we come from, so it's not like you know, it's not what I would expect. You know, I'm still trying to take it in, you know, wondering if it's real, and trying not to get too much of a big head around it, because, you know, the work is only just beginning. You know, I feel like I got a lot to learn. The world has a lot to learn, and everything's being reconsidered. If it weren't for 2020, I know I probably wouldn't have been on the cover.
Right.
So this is a time where we are being given new microphones, new platforms, new opportunities, and we want to make the most of them.
Absolutely. I'm going to pull up the shot of the Afro pick. I mean, this is right here in Philadelphia, right in the plaza. This was the first piece for many that brought them into the knowledge of Hank Willis Thomas. And now I believe it is this piece here that is now traveling the world. And so, Hank, talk about this amazing piece and what's happening with it. Where is it now? How people can see it?
Yeah. Well, I gotta get the exact address. Hold on a second. So I grew up, in North Philadelphia, at least in my very early years, and my grandfather and several of our uncles were black police officers, and my father was a Black Panther, and I actually understood through my childhood the complexities of the different narratives and the different things that people in the Black community celebrate and acknowledge and come together around. That although it might be seen externally as a divisive issue, we know that we can, within the same household, have radical views on quote unquote both sides. Yeah. When we come home, we have the same people doing our hair, same people, that were eating, cooking the food with us and sharing community. And I wanted to make a piece that is really an homage to my grandmother, Ruth Holman Willis, who had a beauty shop, and who I like to point out that a master in Black beauty.
Yeah, indeed.
And so the time that I was growing up, we had a lot more hair.
That we
we had these metal Afro picks,
right.
and they had the fist on it. And because I'm tenderheaded, I had to be strong and get my hair picked.
Exactly.
And in downtown Philadelphia, we would go down, and there's like that 40-foot clothespin that artist named Klaus Oldenburg did. And I always noticed when I looked at public art, there was nothing that really spoke to like the elements of the Black community. Maybe there might be a sculpture here or there, but I wanted to make something that really made African Americans, especially, but also all people of African descent, smile. That our hair is something that we can also celebrate in this country. And so, making the 9-foot Afro pick with Monument Lab and Philadelphia Mural Arts, which went down at Police Plaza, and the place where both that one stood and the Frank Rizzo statue, which is now gone, which I don't think is a coincidence. And now coming back with this Afro pick that's 24 feet, that's now in the lot on 27th and York, right next to North Penn Baptist Church, where my family's been members, or many of our family members have been members for over 100 years. Right. And so bringing that home was really meaningful, and like being able to like see the community gather around it. I can't tell you how enlightening and powerful and exciting it is to have a monument like that in North Philadelphia.
And it's beautiful to see it right back at home, right? Where it kind of all began and began to take shape. Let's dig into some of your pieces. I think, you have such an extensive collection, but these are a few of some of my favorites. And I want, to really talk about these. This one here, breaks all kinds of molds of train of thought around the NFL. Clearly, there have been multiple conversations about the NFL, its treatment of its athletes, and the perceptions that exist. Even when we talk about the NFL Combine, and it's equivalent to almost literally being an auction market of sorts. Talk about that piece, man, and its creation.
Yeah, well, I remember speaking to some athletes who were in the Combine. They talked about like they're measuring your thigh, they're measuring your ankle, they're counting your teeth. They're asking you how high you can jump and how far you can run. at how fast that it really did feel as if you were on the slave auction and you are being auctioned.
Right.
But I wanted to also highlight, you know, all the work that they did for free to get to that auction market, right? Because in the NCAA, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry, fueled on the free labor of the descendants, largely the descendants of slaves and sharecroppers in our country, it's astounding.
Right.
That in the land of the free, that that we have allowed other forms of indentured servitude to take place, because only 1% of them even get into the NFL.
This is true.
Right? And then they might have the same brain injuries and leg injuries and trauma, from a lifetime of dedicating themselves to this sport, and never being compensated. So so this idea, and also in the case of Ole Miss, which is the uniform that person's wearing, is that, that used to be a plantation.
Right.
So we have sometimes people whose ancestors were working on these same fields, doing this backbreaking labor under the sun. And, that was about, the picking of the cotton seed. But, we have the Cotton Bowl in college football. And we know that the merchandise, that's being sold is what a lot of it is the cotton again. So absolutely. I wanted to highlight that.
Listen, and that piece brings up all kinds of conversation when individuals get a chance to see it. But that's not the only sport that you have tackled. I want to bring up two pieces, in fact, that I think are really important to note. This one here kind of says it all. If you're looking at it, it is to the point as it relates to the sport of basketball. And then this piece right here.
Yeah.
A brother going up to dunk over another brother into essentially a noose. Hank, I mean, there's just, it's mind-blowing, the feeling that you get when you're looking at those kind of pieces. Talk about the energy that created those works of art.
Well, and I see you're wearing your 76ers jersey. So
yeah. Talk.
I mean, and again, we have, Dr. J, and Moses Malone, playing basketball in Philadelphia when we were children, and thinking about Charles Barkley. Those were some of the first people. They transcended a lot of the racial and class boundaries in our country through their excellence in sports. And I think a lot about how, people of their talent might have been treated at a different period of time for their bravado, for their flash, for their stature. And I think a lot about how, people were lynched, and black bodies, now we celebrate them hanging from the net. But they were also hanging from the nooses before. And how do we challenge that symbol that has been so threatening to us for so many generations? And part of the idea is that with our work is to challenge, our dominance. I call that one and one. That we can, we have been dunking on the forces of suppression for a long time.
And it's so amazing how you talk about this point of vulnerability for us and what has occurred with that news. Nonetheless, this contrast of power as well that we bring to the table, and our ability to kind of take that basketball and represent it as our issues, our power, our demands, and throw that thing through the very system that has grasped our nets for so long. This piece here. New York Magazine, the cover, all lies matter. I mean, if there has never been a more timely piece, it would be that one right there. Talk about that. I mean, you simply just said, I'm going to take the V out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's, with all due respect to the previous speaker, who I thought was very convincing, and I think he made a lot of strong points. I think there was a big omission in the way in which it's great to be given opportunity and given money, yet at what price, right? And when we talk about the ways in which things are framed, I don't know about you, but I was really bothered by the fact that we had Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. Yeah. I'm like, wait, aren't Black lives part of all lives?
Exactly.
And I realized that a lot of times people who were saying all lives matter actually didn't mean it, because they would have immediately been like, okay, yeah, all lives matter. We're going to go march along with you because we believe Black Lives Matter.
Because we already understand Black lives are a part of all of our lives. Yeah.
Right.
So there's no need to re-narrate this thing.
Right. And then someone pointed out to me, like, all lives matter, but some more than others. So if you read between the lines, it reveals itself. And so I was looking at it and I was like, wait, if I just remove one letter, it speaks volumes.
Yeah.
And I do believe in all of the complexity of not buying into a specific political agenda or just signing up for stuff just because it seems like it's in vogue or it's for us. I also think that we should be looking at it from a broad perspective and in these moments, I'm so proud of you, for instance, for all the ways that you've put yourself out there as an artist, as a civic leader, as a family member, as a Black man, as a storyteller, because we need more people who are willing to go out there, and share their truths from their perspectives and be open to hearing the other voices. So you're really a Renaissance man, and I admire you greatly.
Look, I admire you too, my cousin. It's all in the family. We come from some pretty amazing roots, and it's a blessing to see how those roots have kind of grown. Created some amazing branches, and so, Hank, there are many who are looking at you, who understand the work that you've done, the impact that it has made, not just in Philadelphia, but around the world. From your heart to theirs, if there was a message that you need them to know in this moment, what would it be?
One is, we'll get through this. I think for a lot of people in our generation, this is our first real challenge. This was normal, for our family that came up from Virginia, and like that was, facing racism, facing violence, facing internal and external of strife in our community, facing imminent death, whether it be through the Cold War or polio or plagues. Like that was life.
Yeah, a day in the life.
Yeah, and the fact that we have that ancestral intelligence, we have the survival skills, like in our DNA. Anyone who's watching, and doesn't matter what race you are, but I don't even believe in race. So there's only one race, is human race.
Right.
But any ethnicity you are.
Yeah.
One thing I can say about the beauty of the African diaspora who've survived culturally and spiritually through the slave trade is our joy is Frank, our joy is the key to life. It's this spirit that is indomitable in each of us, that whether whether your family immigrated from another country or was brought here as slaves, or were part of the community that was mass murdered, those of us who survive and can smile are proof of the power of the human spirit. And so our cousin Sungo Willis left us with an incredible framework to consider, which is love overrules. And so carrying Sunga's message is the one that I think is what I'd like to leave people with the most.
Listen, Sunga, man, was an incredible spirit, and I couldn't think of a more fitting. phrase to leave the world with in this conversation. Hank, tell the broadcast audience how they can find your work. And I know you have multiple installations going, but where they can get to you, get connected with your movement, and get engaged.
Well, because we're in Philly, and I know that there's of course, a block away from a former family home, which I didn't even know about. Right. It's where you can see this Afro pick on 27th in New York. Also, I have a sculpture which is 22 feet tall of Joel Embiid's arm pointing towards the sky. It's at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge. Yeah. It's called Unity. And so that'll be there forever. I really hope that we can put 20 or 50 foot Afro pick in Philly forever. Yeah. You can find me at Hank Willis Thomas on Instagram. Mm-hmm. You can go to hankwillisthomas.com. I have multiple collaborations that are active. One is called Wide Awakes. So you can go to wideawakes.com or For Freedoms, FOR Freedoms.org. And then projects that are continuing to travel are like the Writing on the Wall, which is installation compiled mostly or completely of the writing of people who are either currently incarcerated or formerly incarcerated. There's the Truth Booth, which is like a modern day confession booth. And then with For Freedoms, we have about 77 billboards in all 50 states, plus territories like U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico.
Wow. Amazing work, man. Hank, I know your schedule is hectic, but I'm honored that you took time to come to Heart City and just share your message of hope and love and of power. Mm-hmm. I think that is so important, understanding who we are, whose we are, and what we're able to do with all that greatness inside. I love you, man. I honor you.
Love you likewise.
I'm proud of the amazing work you're doing.
Following you, man. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. So you've heard from Hank Willis Thomas, an amazing visual artist. Please, we'll make sure that we post all of his information on our social media pages. I need you to support his work. Go out, check it out. It's right in our community. One major piece right now in North Philadelphia, but for all of the installations around the world, for the broadcast audience, please go out, take pictures of them, post them on your social media pages and hashtag and tag him. Let him know that you've seen the great work that he has done. Also, check out that edition of Vanity Fair where he is on the cover as well. Black art, the art of true voice of our people. It's so crucial to support it in every possible way you can. This show has been absolutely amazing for me, as I hope that it has been for you. We are now at the conclusion of our Vision 2020 series. Next up is the election, Tuesday, November 3rd. You've got to get out and make your voice heard. No excuses. Vote. No excuses. Vote. There are absolutely no excuses. You must vote. Please do us another favor by going to YouTube and clicking the subscribe button. Please, just take you a quick second. Hit that button and then hit the little bell to remind you of all the great shows and content that we have ahead. I'm excited for our future. I hope you are too. You can follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at HeartCity TV. And as always, feel beautiful, look beautiful, and act beautiful. Why? Because you truly are beautiful. I'll see you next week.